On June 23rd, a session was held in this chamber in which all 62 members were present. There were 31 members on this side of the aisle and 30 and Senator Espada who stood up and recited the Pledge of Allegiance, and there were 31 members on the Democrat side who sat in their seats and refused to get up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. But there were 62 people present that day, making up a quorum in which we passed approximately 85 bills which had passed the Assembly and certainly are of critical importance to the people of the state of New York. 62 members is a quorum, and yet the Democrats are refusing to acknowledge that this legislation or these bills were passed. I saw with great interest recent press conference by the Democrats that Senator Albertine mentioned powers for jobs and how critically important it is, and we all understand how critically important that is. I didn't hear him stand up when, in the budget, hundreds of millions of dollars was swept, as Senator Maziarz pointed out so eloquently, from that great program, which would negatively impact so many businesses, especially upstate New York. That bill was also on the Rules Committee, and we were ready to proceed with just about every single bill that Senator Sampson has been talking about, but they refused to even attend the Rules Committee meeting, and they refused to establish a quorum so that we could take up the Rules Committee report and pass these bills. Now, Senator Sampson has pointed out in his press conference that they want to just take up non-controversial bills. Well, we passed these bills. And I find it very interesting, and it may be for his own personal legislative agenda, that mayoral control was not included in that agenda. Could it be simply that Senator Sampson wants to destroy the mayoral control legislation that Mayor Bloomberg has worked so hard to produce on a consensus basis with the teaching community and so many others? Senator Sampson's goal is to kill it. So we've had a number of staff meetings with senators being there, with Senator Espada, and it seems that when you negotiate with our Democrat colleagues, you always go backwards. There's a different person in the room every day. You know, we understand that on June 8th there was a vote of 32-0 to elect Senator Espada temporary president, myself majority leader, but we also have to understand that there has to be an operating agreement through 2010 so that we do not go through this gridlock again. And the Senate Democrat answer is constantly, well, just put it off for another day. You can't put it off for another day. The governor has indicated we are going to be back on numerous occasions. So they may not want to acknowledge what happened on June 8th, but they're wrong. But let's work through this operating agreement, and shortly Senator DeFrancisco will go through some of the important points. You know, I mentioned before when I was questioned, why do you keep talking about that vote? Well, you know, there's a very important and basic principle in our country. The majority rules. There was a change in leadership that day. It was 32-0 because they walked out. And I use one example. In 2000, when the Supreme Court decided that basically the count would stop and President Bush was elected president, you didn't see the U.S. Senate Democrats fold their arms, hold their breath, and pout. They acknowledged that that was an election, and it was done. And it's time for our Democrat friends to acknowledge that we had an election on June 8th, and let's move forward and establish this operating agreement so that we do not have to go through this every couple of weeks. We're going to have critical issues to deal with. The governor has indicated that. So at this time